Now please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking I will by all means establish all mother sentient beings at the level of perfect omniscient enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound teaching and put it into practice. The Dhamma that we speak of today is a torch lighting the way to freedom, complete instructions on the preliminary practices of the profound and secret heart essence of the Dakini, comprised of three main parts: virtuous beginning, middle and end. We've covered the virtuous beginning, and we're currently looking at the virtuous middle, the main body of the text, which is comprised of two main subsections: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and how in doing so to set out on the path itself. So we're currently looking at the second, having covered the first. So we've already covered the first, how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, which was discussed in terms of three subsections, the qualifications of masters to be followed, and so on. We've covered those, and we've now arrived at the second of the two main sections, how in doing so to set out on the path. So we're now in part 2, the main explanation of the stage for setting out on the path, which is comprised of two further subsections. Firstly, the general preliminary practice for each session, and second, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the two phases. So we're currently looking at the first, the general preliminaries for each session which make one a fit vessel. And we began this subsection yesterday, and we'll continue here today. So one very important point in this regard is, as taught in the sutras, if one's practice of discipline is stable, then one's practice of meditation will automatically be stable. Likewise, if one's practice of meditation is stable, wisdom will flourish. It's a bit like a candle or a candle flame. If a candle flame, if there's no wind, nothing to disturb the flame, then the flame can burn clearly and brightly and steadily, right? So all of these things are, namely discipline, meditation and wisdom, are intricately connected. They rely on one another, are related to one another. So this is why it's taught, and Rinpoche quoted several lines of scripture, that one should first of all cultivate discipline, with that foundation engage in meditation, and with that foundation develop wisdom. So we talk about the basis of pure discipline. The basis of pure discipline doesn't necessarily mean to become a fully ordained monastic like a bhikshu. Of course, to be a bhikshu and maintain those vows is something incredibly precious and meritorious. But that is not the only way that we can uphold a foundation of pure discipline. To take the refuge vows and receive the 5 precepts of a lay practitioner, or any one of the other 7 types of personal liberation vows, and to uphold those vows purely, is a way to establish a foundation of pure discipline. And at this level, discipline concerns, it's focused on our physical and verbal conduct, being tamed and gentle, or we could say self-controlled in terms of our physical and verbal conduct. So whether it be the path of personal liberation, we could say the foundational vehicle of Hinayana, the path of the bodhisattvas, or the path of secret mantra Vajrayana, we need the practice of meditation, the practice of essentially vipassana that arises upon the foundation of shamatha. And this realization of vipassana cannot arise without causes and conditions. It cannot just rise of its own accord. One of the vital causes and conditions for vipassana is shamatha, a foundation of shamatha, and for shamatha to arise, then we need discipline. So one of the causes and conditions for shamatha is genuine discipline. So each of these things rest upon one another. They serve as causes and conditions for the other. So here, as I said, there are different ways we can establish the foundation of discipline. Imagine everyone here has taken refuge. I doubt there's anyone here who hasn't taken refuge in the three jewels. Most of us in the Tibetan tradition, Himalayan tradition, shortly after being born, are taken to a lama and receive the hair cutting ceremony. So the child's hair is cut, they receive the refuge vow, a dharma name. In any case, what is happening in this traditional hair cutting ceremony is that the refuge vows are being given. One is taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and one is being entrusted to the protection of the Buddha Amitabha, the long life Buddha Amitabha. So, it's wonderful if we can actually go and take the refuge vows formally from a teacher, our root teacher, or a teacher in whom we have faith and devotion. But in any case, it's vital that we all receive the refuge vows and undergo this hair cutting ceremony, because the refuge vows are the very foundation and basis for all other levels of vow and precepts in the Buddha's teachings. As the scriptures state, the higher vows can be received by all those with refuge, but those without refuge vows are not fit to receive them. So the point is, one has to first receive the refuge vows as a foundation for receiving, say, the bodhisattva vow and so on. So here in this teaching of the preliminary practices, we are going through all of the respective practices of refuge, body, teacher, and so on, one by one. But they all need to lead to the realization of wisdom or insight, prajna, that realizes selflessness. They all need to lead to the dawning of that wisdom that realizes selflessness. And how does such wisdom come about? Well, it comes about from a foundation of shamatha. It needs a foundation of shamatha. Shamatha is we could say, a common practice, a shared and general practice. In the teachings such as Nangjang Buddhahood without meditation, and teachings such as that, when we find reference to shamatha, those texts are actually talking about a shamatha that is the natural union of shamatha and vipassana. However, in a more general context, shamatha, like I say, common shamatha, is a practice that is shared that is found in other traditions as well, non-Buddhist traditions as well, Hindu traditions. There are many Hindu traditions. Practitioners train in shamatha, and they train it even better than us, to the point where through the power of their shamatha, they attain miraculous powers and clairvoyance and so on. So shamatha practice alone can lead to such accomplishment. But in any case, the point is that to give rise to the wisdom that realizes selflessness, which is the main point, we need first of all to cultivate a foundation of shamatha, and to do that we need to apply the eight applications which dispel the 5 faults, and to progress through the 9 stages of resting the mind and so on. These crucial points of shamatha that are mentioned in this text briefly, and that are taught in detail in many other scriptures. So how do we give rise to, or how do we cultivate shamatha? By training in the 8 types of mental application, and thereby dispelling the 5 faults. So what are these 5 faults? What are these 8 types of mental application? Well, if we look to page 49, as listed in Distinguishing the Middle from Extremes, which was one of the 5 treatises of the protected Maitreya, these 5 faults are laziness, forgetting the essential instructions, and so on. So this is the top of page 50. These are said to be the 5 faults. Faults means shortcomings, flaw, shortcoming, things that need to be abandoned and got rid of. So to begin with, if we want to get rid of a certain fault, we first of all need to identify it, right? Know what it is. So here we're talking about training in shamatha meditation, right? We're not talking about the meditation of the great perfection and so on. We're talking about the practice of, we could say, ordinary shamatha, which is an indispensable foundation actually for the practice of the great perfection. It's very important that we understand the different levels and types of meditation. Otherwise, if we get the mistaken idea that all levels of meditation, so ordinary shamatha up to the great perfection, are all the same, it's just a process of halting thoughts, not letting thoughts arise, the absence of thoughts, and that is the main practice of meditation. That is a mistaken understanding. And these days, it's a cause of great concern, actually. There are a lot of teachers who are teaching in this way, in this incorrect way, teaching as if there is just one type of meditation from the foundational vehicle up to the great perfection. This is not the case. So the type of meditation we're talking about here, at this point in the text, is we could say an ordinary common type of shamatha, not the practice of the great perfection. Nevertheless, this is a very important meditation practice, very important for us to develop. So the first of the 5 faults that we need to free ourselves from is laziness. Laziness or lethargy. As Milarepa said, I attained Buddhahood through diligence. It's because of laziness that you guys are still wandering in samsara. So laziness is a serious obstacle and shortcoming. Just this reluctance to engage in practice, lacking the energy to engage in practice, just sitting around with our legs up, so to speak. This is a source of enormous shortcomings. So secondly, forgetting the essential instructions, the essential meditation instructions. So to train in meditation, we need the essential instructions on how to do that. So to forget those instructions, to not keep them in mind. Wildness or dullness. So the wildness and dullness are taken together as one fault. This means when you're meditating, falling asleep, getting drowsy. And again, we're not talking about the practice of the great perfection here, Dzogchen, but for instance, focusing on shamatha by training in shamatha by focusing on an object like a syllable A visualized in front of you, or visualizing the form of Buddha Shakyamuni, our teacher, in front of us, as explained by Mipham Rinpoche in his text. A sage that dispels mind's anguish, which can also be found in translation on Lot's Our House. Mipham Rinpoche said that would be the best possible support for training in shamatha, Buddha Shakyamuni's form, and he explains how you can visualize the whole of Buddha's form and focus on it generally, sort of overall, or you can focus on specific parts of Buddha's form, such as his Ushnisha, such as the point between his eyebrows and so on, to dispel specific faults and develop certain qualities. So best is, Mimra Rinpoche explains, best is to just have a general focus on Buddha Shakyamuni's entire form. But if your mind is turbulent and not resting, not focusing, then you can shift your focus. Focus, for instance, beginning on the Ushnisha, on the top of Buddha's head, and then move your focus down all the way down to his legs, focusing on each part of his body one by one. So that's a skillful means to keep your mind focused if your mind is struggling to focus and remain still. So Mimra Rinpoche explains this in his text. And as I said, this text by Mimra Rinpoche is translated in English and available on Lotsawa House. So when training in shamatha, as practitioners, when training in shamatha, this is how we can do it, this is how we should do it. No need to rely on other teachings, on non-Buddhist teachings, or on I think Rinpoche is referencing the Goenka model of meditation, perhaps. So basically, we have these genuine instructions on shamatha from Mimra Rinpoche and so on, and that's how we can and should practice shamatha. The best support for such shamatha meditation, if we're using a focal object for our shamatha meditation, the best possible object is Buddha Shakyamuni, because his form is naturally blessed. It naturally contains blessings. So just by taking his form as a focal object and spending time looking at it, thinking about it, focusing on it, will automatically bring us blessings and merit and benefits. Otherwise, we could also train using different focal objects like a visualized syllable and so on. When we train in shamatha, cultivate shamatha, and our mind becomes trained in that state, our mind becomes very flexible, pliable, so that whatever we need or want to focus on, immediately we can focus on that without any struggle. So we can, in that sense, gain mastery over our mind. When we reach that point, then it's a sign that we have mastered shamatha to some extent, that we have cultivated a good practice of shamatha. So again, the first of these 5 faults is laziness, right? Thinking, I don't feel like meditating now, I feel a bit tired, I feel a bit sore, I'll do it tomorrow. Laziness is really the root of, it's by falling prey to laziness that we rot, basically. Laziness is a huge fault. Then forgetting the essential instructions. So when we train in meditation, we need to actually have something to meditate on. It means, to that end, we need to receive instructions, right? Instructions that inform us, tell us how it is that we need to practice. So forgetting those essential instructions is a second fault. So the instruction would be, for instance, training in shamatha by using Buddha Shakyamuni's form as a focal object. And if you forget that, then that would be forgetting the essential instructions. Then when you're training in meditation, if you fall prey to dullness, falling asleep, getting drowsy, well, that's dullness, the fault of dullness. And then wildness is being really agitated, like your mind running here and there, just like your mind running here and there. So these 2 extremes of wildness and dullness are faults, they're shortcomings when it comes to meditation. So these are actually wildness and dullness, agitation and sleepiness. These are the worst faults, the biggest obstacles when training in meditation. Then we have non-application. For instance, you're sitting in meditation, focusing your mind on Buddha's form, and then your mind strays away from the focal object. You become distracted. You start thinking about, instead of with your mind focused on Buddha Shakya's form, you start thinking of how you're going to go down to the stupa later to do a kora, how you're going to meet this and that friend. You think about your future plans. So you fall prey to distraction. And instead of noticing your distraction and bringing your mind back, applying a remedy, you just let your mind go off and remain distracted. That's non-application. So when we're practicing meditation, our mind gets distracted, we need to notice that, and having noticed it, immediately we need to bring our mind back. We need to apply a remedy. If we fail to do that, then we're falling into we have the fourth fault, non-application. But then we have the fifth fault, over-application, which is overdoing the application of remedies. For instance, if you overdo the application of antidotes, if you overdo it, then that itself will disrupt and disturb the meditation. So if you apply a remedy, but then you get kind of fixated on the remedy, applying it again and again, fixating, overthinking it, then also meditation will not develop. These days we talk about oxygen and the importance of oxygen in our breath and so on. In Laura Pandita's Entering the Way of the Greater Vehicle, he clearly already understood the whole notion of oxygen and so on, even though we didn't really have that language yet. So he gives this example of a butter lamp, and how a butter lamp needs oxygen to burn. That if the oxygen runs out, if there's insufficient oxygen, then a flame will extinguish naturally. Just like if there's a wind and the wind is too strong, then the flame will go out. So he gives this example to illustrate these two faults, non-application and over-application. So for a flame to burn, it needs oxygen, right? So it needs oxygen to burn. It also needs to be free of factors like strong wind, which threaten to extinguish the flame, right? So, sorry to clarify, a flame needs oxygen, it needs air in order to burn, right? It needs enough oxygen, otherwise the flame will go out. But likewise, if there's too much air, in the sense that if there is wind, if the air starts to move and there's too strong a wind, then the same thing, that wind, that oxygen, can also serve as a cause for the extinguishing of the flame. So I hope this is coming through clearly in translation. With one thing, air. So air is vital for a flame to burn, but at the same time, that same air, if it turns into wind, starts to move, then it can be a cause for extinguishing the flame. So this is an example of to illustrate non-application and over-application. When training in meditation, we need to apply the remedies, just like a flame needs oxygen. But if we over-apply the remedies, then that will be an obstacle, just like wind, which is basically oxygen, moving and causing a flame to go out. So this is taught in the great scholar Ngondro Mahapandita's treatise, Entering the Way to the Greater Vehicle, which is also translated in English. The state of meditation and conceptual thoughts are kind of opposite states. So the nature of thought, of conceptual thought, is movement. Thoughts move, they go here and there, they're constantly wandering and moving. The state of meditation is a state of stillness, we could say. A state of focus, stillness. That's not quite the right word, but basically a state free of the movement and fluctuation of thoughts. So these two states are actually opposite from one another. And this being so, we are so habituated to thoughts, right? And we're so used to thinking. So when we then start training in meditation, we we feel bored. We are not enthusiastic. To still the mind and be free of thoughts, it's not something. And when we start training in meditation and our mind becomes more still, more free of thoughts, then we become bored, or maybe we fall asleep because there's no mental movement to keep us active. We're not used to this state of being free of thought. We find it unpleasant at first, uncomfortable. And that itself is an obstacle to practice, the fact that we're not familiar with this state of meditation, with this state of non-thought. And this is why often when we engage in practice, even if it be, say, mantra recitation and so on, we might find ourselves falling asleep, getting drowsy, feeling unenthusiastic, and so on. It's because we're not familiar with that state. What we're familiar with is thoughts. In Shabkara's songs, in Shabkara's spiritual songs, which we can read in his life story, also translated into English, he also speaks about these points, these vital points of meditation. So again, to go through them once more, we have laziness, being lazy and uneager to practice. Secondly, forgetting the words and their meaning with regard to what one is meditating on. Thirdly, being overpowered by wildness or dullness. Not using the antidote when either of these two occur. So, when we're meditating, we fall prey to either wildness, agitated state of mind, thinking this and that, or dullness, falling asleep, being dull and lethargic. We need to notice that we've fallen into these faults. If we, however, don't bother to notice and don't bother to then apply an antidote to remedy dullness and remedy wildness, then we're falling into the fourth fault of non-application. So then we have the fifth fault of over-application. So maybe you notice you're distracted or so on, you bring your mind back to the focal object, you bring to mind the form of Buddha Shakyamuni, you place your attention on that form, now your attention is resting on the form of Buddha Shakyamuni, but then you just don't let go. You just keep on you keep on resetting your mind, so to speak. You keep on meddling. Your mind is actually resting already on Buddha's form, but you just won't let it be. And so the actual state of meditation can't arise. You can't arrive at the actual state of meditation. You're just disturbing your mind. This is over-application. It's a bit like Rinpoche just gave the example of making butter and so on. If you stir too much, if you stir too little, you won't get butter, but if you stir too much, also you won't get butter, right? So we could use probably other cooking examples as well. If you overstir something, if you don't let a recipe sit, then you're actually going to ruin the recipe, right? So when with mindfulness you place your attention on the focal object, on a Buddha Shakyamuni say, then when once the mind is settled and resting there, then you need to let be. Just let the mind rest and sustain that state of gentle focus. No need to, again, with sort of intentional mindfulness, place your attention there and have too tight a focus and fixate on the remedy. You need to just let go a bit there. And then, if you just sustain that state of gentle focus, then you can arrive at the state of genuine shamatha, genuine meditation. And it's all, most crucially, it's all a question of habituation, of applying ourselves again and again and again with effort, right? That is the only way that we will cultivate meditation and accomplish meditation, to apply ourselves again and again. Apply our attention to the focal object again and again, train again and again. like down in Pokhara, there's a specific monastery next to which I think there is kind of deep holes in the rocks around there. Where did those holes come from? Well, they've come from the drops of water that drip from the rock face above, and over the course of hundreds of years, those drops of water have eroded the rock and formed deep holes, right? So it's the same with meditation. Persistent effort, repeated training. It's persistent effort and repeated training that will lead to our accomplishment. We shouldn't think, I've done 1 or 2 sessions of meditation, a few days of meditation, but nothing's happened, I haven't improved, so therefore meditation doesn't work, or I'm not going to bother doing it. A lot of Chinese or people new to the Dhamma often think like that. That's a mistake. As with anything, we need to apply ourselves persistently, right, and train again and again, habituate ourselves bit by bit, and just like drops of water over the course of time, eroding deep holes in rock. In the same way, we can train our minds, train and transform our minds, and eventually accomplish meditation. It's like that with shamatha meditation and with other types of practice too. So in the Great Perfection, when it comes to the practice of the Great Perfection, it's taught that one does not need to rest or intentionally rest. The text taught about being free of intentional resting, talk about self-liberation and so on, but to immediately kind of presume that one can train like that, rest like that, is going a bit too far. That would be like a dog trying to leap like a lion. So even when training in the Great Perfection, as a beginner, one needs to cultivate an aspect of stillness, of rest in one's meditation. Otherwise, meditation will not flourish. So this aspect of stillness and rest, or we could say, stillness or rest, is vital at all levels of meditation. So again, these days it seems a lot of people have some misunderstanding about meditation, and they think meditation is just as you see people teach on YouTube and all over the place these days, meditation is you just ring the singing bowl or ring a bell, you focus on the sound and then you sit still, let be, and that is meditation, full stop. Like that is meditation, full stop. There are no other types of meditation. This is this is a misunderstanding, and I think it's a very troubling misunderstanding that's being kind of perpetuated in many places. So it's important that we understand the different types of meditation. Yes, to say ring the singing bowl and resting at ease, that is a type of meditation. It is a simple method to bring the mind to rest, to help the mind become more still. But there is a lot more to meditation than that. There are many other different types and levels of meditation, so we need to be aware of that. So, for instance, when we talk about meditation, we have to be clear about what are we meditating on. Are we meditating on, or we could say, are we training in shamatha? Are we training in the Great Madhyamaka? Are we training in the Great Perfection? Are we training in the Great Seal, Mahamudra? What is it that we are meditating on? We need to be clear about that from the outset. What type of meditation are we doing? So now we come to the 8 types of mental application, and we'll go through these more quickly. In any case, I've given a very clear explanation of the 5 faults, really pointed out, explained clearly what the 5 faults that we need to discard are, right? So that should all be clear in our minds now. The 5 faults that we need to rid ourselves from when training in meditation. Then we have the 8 types of mental application that dispel these 5 faults. So at the bottom of page 50, we find in the bottom paragraph, there are 4 antidotes to laziness. First of all, wanting to meditate, namely interest. So if you lack interest in something, the wish to do something, or interest in something, you're never going to do it, right? Interest is a vital factor. And if you have interest, then that interest will remedy laziness, right? It'll remedy laziness, hesitation, reluctance. Meditation is not easy. It's not something easy. Your knees will hurt, your back will hurt sometimes you'll be thirsty, restless, uncomfortable physically. So we need interest, we need diligence in order to deal with this discomfort and in order to dispel laziness. Without diligence, we cannot accomplish anything, whether it be dharma or mundane, something mundane. Without being willing to put in some effort, to exert ourselves, we'll never accomplish anything, worldly or spiritual. So then we have the third factor, faith, and fourthly, a perfectly trained and flexible fit body, speech and mind, which is the result of diligence. So to backtrack, faith, the third of the 4 antidotes to laziness, faith is the cause that gives rise to interest. Faith is, we could say faith is liking something, right? So we could say faith is basically liking something. The object of our faith in this sense could be anything. It could be that we have faith in drinking, or we have faith in meat eating. It means basically we like doing that thing. Because we like doing that thing, then that's going to stimulate our interest and kind of lead us to doing it, right? So faith is a crucial aspect. A crucial factor, sorry. And then fourthly, a perfectly trained and flexible fit body, speech and mind, which is the result of diligence. So when we train diligently in something, we become very adept in that action, right? Adept in that skill. For instance, it might be cutting wood, Someone who is very skilled in cutting wood with a single strike of the axe can fell a tree. They can fell the tree without hurting themselves, without hurting others, and with very little effort. Someone who's not skilled in cutting wood, like myself, might hack away at a tree forever, but not fell the tree. Might even end up, because of lack of skill, might even end up cutting oneself or cutting one's feet or something. So where does this skill and dexterity come from? It comes from applied effort, from diligent practice and training in the past, right? So as I mentioned last, my root guru Khenpo Daza Rinpoche at one point went to Ngondro in South India, Kyabje Penno Rinpoche's monastery, at the invitation of Kyabje Penno Rinpoche and the entreatment of Kyabje Dilwa Khyentse Rinpoche. There were many students there wishing to study the scriptures, and Khenpo Daza Rinpoche was invited to teach them. So I accompanied Khenpo Daza Rinpoche at the time and received the teachings he gave there. So Khenpo Daza Rinpoche taught there for, I think she said, 5 years, and taught various scriptures, Pramana, Abhidhamma, and so on and so forth. So I missed a part of this story, but I think Rinpoche saying Khenpo Daza Rinpoche So I think when she's saying Kimbo Dazu Rinpoche had studied grammar, spelling, and many other subjects under the tutelage of Punda Kin Rinpoche. And at one point, Punda Kin Rinpoche told Kimbo Dazu Rinpoche and some other Kembos at the time, if you go to Sikkim and Bhutan and so on and teach there, I don't know how much of a kind of disposition they'll have for the philosophy and major treatises, but they certainly have a disposition for the secular sciences of linguistics and so on. So it's important that you study linguistics and these subjects very well. And so the attunement of his teacher, Punda Kin Rinpoche, who was one of the attunement of his teacher, he studied linguistics and other subjects and really perfected those studies. And the anecdote was might not translate so much to the English language, but there was some advice about the importance of studying linguistics and grammar and spelling and how to do that, the process of doing that, and how Kimbo Dazu Rinpoche was really mastered these aspects of knowledge. So back to the 8 types of mental application. We've just gone over the first 4: interest, effort, and their respective cause and result. So interest, effort, and then faith, which is the cause that gives rise to interest, and a perfectly trained and flexible body, speech, and mind, which is the result of such diligence. So we're reading once more through the bottom of page 50, the first 4 of the 8 types of mental application. So the first 4 of the 8 types of mental application are antidotes to laziness. And the 8 types of mental application, they are remedies to the 5 faults. They are factors that free us from the 5 faults. So the first of the 5 faults is laziness, and laziness is dispelled by means of the first 4 of the 8 types of mental application, namely interest, effort or diligence, and their respective cause and result. So those being faith and a perfectly trained and flexible body, speech and mind, or we could just say a pliable mind, more simply speaking. So these first 4 factors, applications, are antidotes to laziness. Interest, effort, faith, and a pliable mind. So the paragraph here that begins, "There are 4 antidotes to laziness," this is expanding on the verse quoted above, right? The verse that begins interest, effort, and so on, and running through those 8 applications one by one. Then the antidote to forgetting the object of concentration is unforgetting mindfulness of the words and their meaning. So the second of the 5 faults is forgetting the essential instructions. This is remedied by unforgetting mindfulness. Then there is vigilance, checking whether or not wildness and dullness are occurring. So the third of the 5 faults, wildness or dullness, this is remedied by vigilance. Both wildness or agitation and dullness or lethargy, they are both remedied by vigilance. What does vigilance mean? It means to constantly be aware of and to scrutinize the state of one's body, speech and mind. To be aware of the state of one's body, speech and mind. That is vigilance. And this acts as the remedy for wildness and dullness. In the Way of the Bodhisattva by the Bodhisattva Shantideva, there's an entire chapter teaching vigilance, the importance of vigilance. Now, actual application of the antidote to eliminate these when they do occur. So this is the remedy for non-application, failing to apply the remedies during meditation. So, say we are sitting in meditation, focusing our mind on the form of Buddha Shakyamuni, and then our mind strays from the object. We start thinking about something else. Well, then we need to notice that we've become distracted, that we're now thinking not about Buddha Shakyamuni, but about our business, our farming, or what have you. We need to bring our mind back to the focal object, place our attention once more on the form of Buddha Shakyamuni. So that is how we should practice. That is actual application, right? Noticing when we become distracted and so on, and bringing our mind back to the practice. This is actual application of the antidote, and this remedies non-application. And then we have non-application, leaving things be, as the remedy to applying the antidote too strongly. So non-application is the remedy to over-application. So it's a fine balance, right, we could say, between these two, between non-application and over-application. These are both faults, and they're opposites, so they're remedies, right, as we see here. For instance, you might become distracted, and you notice, then you bring your mind back to the focal object of Buddha Shakyamuni. But if you fail to leave your mind be once it's settled back on the focal object, and you keep on thinking to yourself, kind of very intentionally, focus on Buddha, 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 then your mind is never going to settle. You're never going to arrive in the actual state of meditation, because you're kind of overwrought, you're too tense, you're overdoing it. So it's just like the example Rongsa Mahapandita gave of a candle. A candle needs oxygen, it needs air to burn, but if that at the same time air itself can become the cause of the flame going out, right? If it becomes windy. So it's a balance between these two. Okay, so now we've covered the 8 types of mental application that remedy the 5 faults. Having got this clear, with clear understanding of these vital points, sit on a comfortable seat, soft and level. When we say soft here, we mean firm but soft, so not too hard, but not too soft, so not like a sofa, like these sofas you have in the West, where you just can't sit up straight, your body just sinks into them, and body becomes all floppy, and it's just not possible to maintain a straight spine and a good posture when sitting on, these we could say these comfy sofas. So we're not talking about that kind of comfortable seat, but a firm but not too firm seat. As the essential point for the body, sit in the 7-point Virochana or any other comfortable posture. You can find explanations of the 7-point posture of Virochana in various texts. There's no struggle there. So as it says here, as long as you're practicing the step-by-step instructions, never sit in an ordinary fashion, lying or leaning against anything. But as we jump up. So sit in the 7-point posture or any other comfortable posture with your back straight, as we find in instructions like the Pith instruction given by Guru Mishiti Yeshit Sogyal, Refined Gold. The Pith instruction of Refined Gold. He says, you just sit, let your mind be at ease, sit and let be clearly, vividly, nakedly, without contriving your posture. So there are some contexts where it's taught like that. It's taught just sit in whatever posture you feel comfortable in and meditate. But as it says here, as long as you're practicing the step-by-step instructions, apart from when you have to adopt any general or specific physical postures, never sit in an ordinary fashion, lying or leaning against anything. For instance, if you're doing puja or a ritual and you lean back against the wall or you kind of sit crooked, that's really not good. It's not helpful. It's so important to keep our spine straight. This influences our state of mind, and it also influences our health, as I mentioned the other day. The reason for this, the reason that it's so important to sit up straight, is that the body is like a city, the channels are like the streets, the subtle energy in them is like a horse, and the consciousness is like a crippled rider. So if movement is bound by bad posture, then it's like the street junctions are blocked, and the rider and horse are trapped inside and cannot move. In the Turgal practices of the Great Perfection, there are lots of different postures that are taught for specific reasons. Anyway, unless the body is forced into the posture, the mind will not stay still. So this speaks to the importance of the posture and how it relates to the mind, how it affects our state of mind. Like in the practice of Turgal, it's said that it's vital that one adopts the various postures correctly, exactly. Otherwise, the states of meditation will not come about. So this just speaks to the importance of adopting a correct physical posture. If the right conditions are arranged in the body, realization will take birth in the mind, because there's this connection between body and mind. So there are probably many of you here who are training in the channels, winds and essences and the yogic practices. And in those teachings, there are detailed explanations of how to expel the stale air 3 times through the right nostril and so on. So first we can, if you're expelling the stale breath 9 times, you can first of all expel the breath of anger 3 times, the breath of attachment 3 times, the breath of ignorance 3 times, and so on. There are lots of different styles of expelling the stale breath, as taught in the yogic practices, like as Rinpoche gestured, holding your hands out in different ways, and so on and so forth. I actually am not learned in these things. So I do this expelling the stale breath in a much more simple way, because I haven't actually studied the yogic practices in detail. So just exhale, block the left nostril and breathe out through the right nostril 3 times, exhaling the stale breath of anger. Then block the right nostril, exhale the breath 3 times through the left nostril, exhaling the stale breath of attachment, and then breathe out 3 times, exhaling this combined stale breath, the stale breath of ignorance, thinking that all of them exit me like dirty wind and disappear. So in the past, I had the intention to study the yogic practices of the subtle channels, winds, and essences in more detail, especially specifically some of the Dujum Tesa practices on these things. And I was also encouraged to do so by some other masters. I requested Dongse Chinanobu Rinpoche to teach me, and he said, how can I teach the yogas these days? I've had so many operations and so on, those are integrated with my channels. And then I said, but Rinpoche, if you could give me the main instructions and overview, and then I will go through the actual exercises and so on with another Lama. Rinpoche mentioned this Lama who's very Dujum Tesa practitioner, who's very learned in the yogas, and he will go through the physical exercises with me. And Rinpoche then agreed and said, oh, that would work, sure. But then for various reasons, it didn't come about, that more detailed study of yogic practices. In any case, back to the text. So expel the stale air in this way. Each time you do so, imagine all the negative actions and so on, accumulated by all sentient beings in the beginningless series of lives, all gathered together and being flushed out with the air through the nostrils. So anyway, I know I'm going off on these tangents here and there, but I think it's Tugu Pema Wangya Rinpoche told me at one point, if you could study the yogic practices of the Dujum Tesa, that would really help. It would help our tradition, especially the Namjang Puchi yogic practices of Dujum Tesa. Those yogic practices are really excellent. Those and other practices as found in the Dujum Tesa. That would really help our tradition, actually. There are lots of people who learned in those yogic practices, he said, but they're not that learned scholars, and so they're not able to necessarily explain or share the teachings properly or as well as they could be. So it would be very beneficial if you could learn these things for the sake of the tradition. But for various reasons, conditions, that didn't come about. And now I'm quite old, I'm 61. And it's not that, it's not the best time to learn the yogas when you're older, better to when you're younger. And maybe it's not so necessary also for me. Anyway, imagine that all of these adverse factors, illnesses and so on, are flushed out from your body as you exhale the air through your nostrils, and that the whole inside of your body becomes pure as if thoroughly rinsed. This is like washing out a container before pouring some valuable substance into it. After that, leave the mind in its natural state for a while. When you've managed to lay a firm foundation for meditation that's not shaken by circumstances, so a foundation that's not shaken by circumstances, by wildness, agitation, laziness, and so on, when you become immune to such circumstances, then longingly arouse bodhicitta. So here we are practicing the preliminaries, right? The preliminaries of the practice, beginning with refuge, bodhicitta, and so on. This is how we begin our sessions, begin our practice, right? With these preliminary meditations, whether we're focusing on refuge or bodhicitta, the generation stage, the subtle channels and so on, all the way up to the practices of the great perfection. This is how we need to begin our practice sessions. So we need to longingly arouse bodhicitta, and then we need to visualize in the space in front of us on a level with the point between your eyebrows, in an expanse filled with brilliant rays and circles of rainbow light, a jewel throne borne by lions. So when we say rainbow, we're also rainbow and rainbow light. This is to say that all of this appears, but it doesn't exist. It appears vividly, but without substantial concrete existence. So in an expanse of rainbow lights, we visualize a throne made of jewels that is being held up by lions. So there are reasons, actually, profound reasons why the Buddha's thrones are held up by lions and other animals. You might think, what is going on here? Why do you have lions, like wild animals? Holding up the Buddha's throne. One might think it's inappropriate or strange, but if you study the tantras like the Guhyagarbha Tantra and so on, then you will find the explanations for these things. So on top of this throne, visualize the multicolored lotus, sun and moon. And upon this seat is your gracious root guru. So your gracious root guru, in my case, Kyabji Juju Rinpoche, Dongse Chine Nomba Rinpoche, Kyamud Daza Rinpoche, Kyamud Chugi Rinpoche, and so on. So whoever your personal root guru is, you visualize them. And then you might think, well, was it really okay to meditate, to visualize at the same time 6, 7 or more root gurus? Absolutely it is. As taught in one of Longchenpa's texts, it's taught that one should condense or dissolve all one's gurus into one single guru. So one's different gurus into one, and meditate or visualize them all together in that way. One time in the past, Lama, one of my Dharma friends, invited me to teach a group of 50 or so Chinese students in Taiwan. And there was someone there who had received lots of teachings from teachings of the teachers of the different traditions, Sakya, Geluk, Kagyu, Nyingma, and now he felt very confused and conflicted. So now, having received each and every empowerment from these different traditions, he had been told, now you have a commitment to do this practice, you have a commitment to this teacher, regard this teacher as your root teacher, you have to do this sadhana without break every day. And he was kind of overwhelmed by the commitments he'd taken on, and they seemed to conflict with one another in his mind. So he says, I have too many gurus that I've committed to, too many practices I'm obliged to do every day. When I do this sadhana, I have to recite this mantra, I have to visualize this guru, and so on and so forth. So of course, everything he'd been told was absolutely true. That is how it goes. Once you receive the empowerment of a certain deity, then indeed you must maintain the practice of that deity. Once you receive an empowerment from a certain teacher, you must honor that teacher as your guru, and so on. So anyway, this student with this issue, with this problem, posed his question to my Dharma friend. He was actually his student, but then my Dharma friend asked me to answer the question, and so I explained, just as Longchenpa taught, that one should, however many root gurus you have, likewise with deities, however many yidam deities you have, you should bring them all together, bring them to mind and gather them together into a single essence. They are indeed a single identity, a single essence ultimately. So bring all your gurus together into a single essence, bring all your yidam deities together into a single essence. So this means all of the different yidam deities of the different traditions, like Vajra, Varahi, and Rinpoche mentioned many different deities, Yamantaka and so on. Bring them all into one, into the sovereign deity Vajrasattva, who is Lord of the Mandala, who embodies all 100 peaceful and wrathful deities. Likewise, dissolve all of your gurus into a single guru, the sovereign of the Mandala, who embodies all. And then there is no conflict, there is no difficulty, and this really dispelled the confusion and conflict in this student's mind. So this is how it's taught. And we find these vital points of instruction in the teachings of the omniscient Longchenpa. Without his instructions, things would be quite difficult. But so, upon this Vajra throne, we visualize our gracious root teacher, and as I've just explained, this includes all of one's root teachers all gathered into one, into a single essence, appearing in the form of the lake-born diamond bearer, namely Vajra Guru Rinpoche, appearing here as blue in color, so clear blue in color, dark blue in color. So clear blue, but specifically dark blue, utterly beautiful on account of his having the major and minor marks of a Buddha. So, and adorned with silks and jewels, with all of the full attire of the Sambhogakaya Buddhas. So the Guru, as we're visualizing the Guru here as, in essence, our root Guru in the form of Guru Rinpoche, who in this context has taken on the appearance of Vajradhara, so dark blue in color, beautiful with all the Sambhogakaya silks, jewels, and so on. His two hands holding Vajra and bell crossed over his chest, and in union with his consort, Sogyal, meaning Khandra Yeshit Sogyal. She is white tinged with red. So in Tibetan, you'll hear the text is translated very carefully, white tinged with red, often in Tibetan. For those of you who read Tibetan, you'll have two colors, like here, kar, mar, white, red. Literally, that's how the Tibetan reads, white, red. What that means is the first color is the primary color, and the second color is the sort of tinge or hue. So, kar, mar, white, red means white in color, but with a red tinge or a red glow. So, if it was red, white, it would be red in color, but with a white glow. So that's how it goes when the deity's colors are described. It's helpful to know that. The first color is the primary color, the second color is like the hue or tinge. So she's white tinged with red and naked, and she holds a knife and skull. They are in union. So male and female deity here in union. This union is a natural expression of the natural unity, the natural state, which is the natural unity of appearance and emptiness, bliss and emptiness, awareness and emptiness, and so on. These different terms of unity that we find specific terms, unity of appearance and emptiness, or bliss, emptiness, and so on and so forth, that are describing the natural ultimate state. We find these different specific terms used in different contexts, like different levels of teachings, but they're all describing the natural union of the ultimate state. So this is what we need to visualize in the space before us. It is difficult to visualize clearly and vividly, but if we struggle with visualization, we shouldn't just give up. We need to really just keep on trying and keep applying ourselves, trying to visualize as clearly and best as we can, even if it proves difficult. Visualize him as having an illusion like wisdom body, apparent yet empty, considering you with great delight, as if you were actually present, and recite the visualization text. So, as it says, apparent yet empty, so the natural unity of appearance and emptiness and so on. Then we have some lines of liturgy. These lines of liturgy here beginning in the sky in front of me, these are the liturgy of the Ngondro, the Khandra Nyingtik Ngondro itself. We recite these to invoke this visualization, and then generate intense longing devotion, seeing your teacher as the Buddha in person, and with hands joined at your heart, pray one pointedly, to the teacher I pray, and so on. So these lines are also lines of liturgy that we chant in this Ngondro practice. So Rinpoche reading through these lines of liturgy, these lines of supplication, to the teacher I pray, to the teacher all-pervading absolute body I pray, and so on. So we recite these lines of supplication with heartfelt devotion, with the perception that our teacher is the Buddha, the Buddha himself, and is vividly present right before us. So this is how this specific Ngondro practice begins, with this visualization and supplication, these sections of liturgy. In the Namkha Kyungsong tradition, when practicing this Ngondro, the Satya Ngondro, this Ngondro, which we call the Satya Ngondro, we begin with an additional blessing of speech, which is extracted from another Dzogchen Ngondro. So we begin with a speech blessing in the Namkha Kyungsong tradition, and then we perform this visualization of the Guru beginning in the sky in front of me and so on. And then before reciting to the teacher I pray, we recite Dujun Rinpoche's beautiful calling the Guru from afar. It is such a blessed, extraordinary prayer, Dujun Rinpoche's famous calling the Guru from afar. And you can find that easily in English translation. And I'll just add in, Rinpoche also wrote a beautiful commentary on that text himself, which also you can find on Lhasa House. That prayer is so blessed. Dujun Rinpoche is calling the Guru from afar. It's all written from the point of view of the realization of the great perfection, and if we recite that with devotion and faith, it can really help to inspire realization of the great perfection in one's mind. So after reciting that Kolu the Guru from afar, then in our tradition we then recite to the teacher I pray, and so on. And you imagine that as a result of your prayer, the teacher cannot help but be inspired and delighted, and so on. So we'll pause here, dedicate the merit, and have 30-minute break.